my sweet. Our last night together. Who would believe it has been 65 years since our first night together as man and wife? And to think that our wedding night also was spent in a room lit mainly by candlelight. All those years have slid away. I still recall that night in Brighton, the Sea View guest room above the Albion pub, St. George's Road, December the 5th, 1952. It is all still there, Leah. Every moment. Pride of place. I actually still recall the slight mustiness in that room, as if the curtains needed airing. And I can still feel the hot wax spilling over my hands when I moved that candle so that I could see you. And the weight of the wedding ring on my finger. Certain memories just seem to stick. Details of history, Myer, you used to say. Irrelevant moments that sear themselves into your memory. Those little things that seem so insignificant at the time, but for some reason or other, they never disappear. They decide that they are going to stick with you, whether you want them to or not. I mean, I could not have been more than 5 years old, and yet I remember as clear as day Rebbe Mendel ripping apart a warm challah bread and explaining to me why there were 6 strands in there. Or why should I remember that the oven door in our kitchen needed to be lifted a little bit on the left before it could open? Now, why would I remember that? Why remember that when there are far more important things in my life that have gone? And some that I am glad have gone. Gone? Well, maybe they just stayed away. You only realize how good your memory is when you try to forget. I took all of our memories together and I placed them on top of the previous ones to try and bury them as deep as I could. I thought that if I couldn't get rid of them, at least I could smother them. Sometimes my mind wouldn't let me do that. From you onwards, every memory was a blessed one, Leah. For 40 years, I said nothing, and you never forced me to explain. You knew, and you understood, even though I never said. Most of it. You drew a line under my life, Leah. A woman of worth. You know, I had 7 older sisters, and yet despite that, I was still a happy child. Our parents cared for us, provided for us all, and loved us all. Home, friends, learning Torah, that was my life. And my world was the village, We all lived as a community in those days together, side by side. Nobody knew any differences. It was multiculturalism before anybody ever came up with that word. And then, one day, destroyed. You know, one of the greatest and simplest pleasures of my life was sitting in that chair looking out across the garden and seeing young Jonah kicking his football up against the garage wall. And yet even then, that knot was always there, in the pit of my stomach. You know that feeling when you're in the supermarket and you turn around and for a second your child isn't there? That knot. I was 9 years old when my childhood came to an end. No need to lock your homes. You will only be gone for a short while. And that was when that knot first entered my body. Pushed, shoved, kicked, all the way to the railway station. 1/4 of our village. It was chaos. Women were separated from their children. Children cried out for their mothers and fathers. And as more and more people scrambled into the cattle wagons, I found myself being pushed up to the side. And there, just through a crack in the wood, I could see. And I tried to comprehend the horrors that I was witnessing. There was a young woman there, a mother. She was crying. Her baby was crying. And this guard, he was filled with hate. I have never seen so much hate. He was foaming with hate. And he snatched the baby from the mother by the legs and swung it up against the side of the wagon. And I saw the woman on her knees. And on the white snow there was blood and yet, as the train pulled away and the wails became whimpers and the children stopped crying, I find myself looking out through that crack and thinking how beautiful the sky and the mountains were beyond our village. How much sugar is that? And how can I explain what happened next? I can't. I could tell you what happened, but I can't explain. I was a child, and then I became a number. And then I became a living thing, trying to do everything I could to stay on the right side of luck. And after that, I became a lost, hopeless soul, willing to do anything to avoid becoming that number. I remember standing in a field in winter, one of row upon row upon row of hopeless souls. It was freezing cold. I was 12 years old, and we stood there for hours. I never did find out why. 2 rows in front of me, there was an SS guard beating a man who had fallen to the ground. And as that helpless soul tried to struggle to his feet, the guard was stomping on him. And you know what he said? He said, "If you survive this, who will you find who will believe what you have to say?" Who will believe? I was silent for 40 years, and you know why? Because I feared what that guard said. I had the blessing and the burden of being a survivor. For no other reason, I think, other than luck. And you, Leah, you helped me speak again. You helped me to become the voice of that hopeless soul who died with no voice in that field in winter. I was thinking of the lives of those people who came through that hell. What incredible people they became. Doctors, musicians, poets, chemists, businessmen, pacifists, soldiers, world leaders. No. Strong men and women. Such incredible human beings. I myself was not incredible. My greatest achievement was you, Leah, my shining star. And even that was down to my luck. With a little bit of help from your old friend Beatty. God bless her soul. You can imagine I was a little confused that cold winter morning in 1949 when Beatty came up to me. She was no looker. And she explained to me that you were sorry you could not come to the dance with me because you were unwell. But would I please come to her and visit her? Well, my heart was going. And I thought to myself, what dance? Leah has never even spoken to me before. So you can imagine how nervous I was when I on the door of your parents' house, and you came and opened the door, and just for a second I thought I saw a little confusion in your eyes, and then you smiled and you welcomed me in. It was years before I realized that actually the message had been intended for Myer Orblowitz, who lived 2 blocks down the road. And poor old Beatty had just delivered the message to the wrong Myer. My luck. My muzzle led me to you, Leah. And you accepted me. You had courage. And my life changed beyond belief. My mind wandered as we ate our Passover meal last week. And suddenly, I felt alive in a way that I had never felt before. I sat like Moses at the head of my table, with you, my wife, beside me. And there were our children and their children. And there, in the midst of all, safe, and no older than that baby that I saw smashed against the side of the railway wagon. There was our first great-grandchild. Suddenly, that knot inside me went away. I felt my heart burst with life and with hope, but mainly love. A new dawn. And the start of a new journey for both of us. No longer the two of us together. But then when we were together, I never thought of us as two. Always as one. I was the luckiest man alive. I have to go now, Leah. I loved our life together.